All right. Well, we're all here and it's 3:01, so shall we call the meeting to order?
Sure.
Kelly, I'm assuming you have roll call handled.
Only when talking, because we can only have three on at the same time.
Elizabeth Johnston,
I'm here.
Kevin McCarthy,
Here.
Sheila Montney,
Here.
Matt Lane,
Here.
Stephanie Barish.
Here. I turned it off, see? Do we have any members of the public who have wanted to appear? Fabulous. All right. Moving on to approval of the minutes. So we have December 30th, January 2nd, and May 27th meeting minutes to approve.
I'll make a motion.
I'll second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? On to items for action. So our first item for action is discussion around multi-year and continuation awards. Kelly, do you want to take the topic?
Sure. We received at BHCC and from other providers, we've received some commentary that they thought that due to difficulty with budget planning, it would be nice if we offered continuation awards or renewals to help with that planning process so they would be able to better plan their budgets for next year. We haven't done that before, so we wanted to bring that to the group and see what the thoughts were.
So I'll make a motion to bring 4A to the floor.
Thank you.
And just
Do I
second.
need a second?
Sure.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Kevin.
It's a different process than I'm used to, so.
All right. Discussion. As a provider representative, I will share, I don't know who brought this forth, but the fact that the annual awards from the county are calendar year, while many of the providers work on a fiscal year, makes it challenging for providers to be able to plan their next year's budget, knowing that any current grant amount, regardless of the provider, then would be ending December 31st, and then not knowing what the outcome would be beyond that. I would also just say additionally that knowing that some of the funds are used to support new types of services and programs, it is very, very challenging for a provider to build something for 1 year. So that's just my 2 cents on the idea.
I mean, I can see where that would certainly be helpful. I mean, the feedback that you're getting, is it from all across the board? Is it certain specific types of funding requests that might be better served for multi-year?
It's been from providers that have long-standing projects that will take a few years to stand up and get fully developed. Not the one and done type projects where they just need that like startup money. That's who's been letting us know. We had of our annual NOFO, one of the questions that Ashwini put on the application was, would your project interested in funding beyond 2026? And 3 individuals did check that box, or 3 organizations did check that box. Yes.
Okay.
Only 3.
Only 3. Yes.
Thought they all would check the box. My money as long as you give it to me.
I think that offering this as a option is, I think, to your point, helpful with organizations and planning purposes. I don't think that it needs to be the default by any means, but it does need to be taken on a case-by-case basis, is my opinion, as to making sure that we are supporting organizations and servicing the community as best as possible. So
That makes sense to me. I'm wondering, when someone fills out an application and obtains funding, are those funds restricted for them as to what was on the application? Okay. And is there an opportunity to collaborate with the city and the town around some of these where we're also contributing to the same sources through CDBG or in Bloomington's case, John M. Scott, where maybe we might, just have a collaborative approach, especially when it's the same providers.
I think many of those providers, if they're aware of the other funding sources, do apply to multiple sources, especially if it's a smaller amount that they're eligible for from other foundations. So I do think there's some of that already, but certainly I think that's information that could be shared through the NOFO of the other funding sources to try to collaborate if you're not able to give the entirety of the request, that there could be a partnership there that would be I think very good.
I think it'd be well received by the city at least and provide an opportunity again for people to work together. So thanks.
Question, did we, when the ROE was spinning up their school, did we give them a multi-year grant? I thought back in the recesses, there was a larger amount, a diminishing amount, then a third year kind of done. But I know that was startup essentially, but a diminishing till they became self-supportive.
Yes. So when Kelly had mentioned that we haven't done this before, we haven't done that with recent staff. So this staff has not been aware of things that were done back in like 2018, 2019. But there were a couple when the director of behavioral health coordination was Tricia Malott, and then right after her exodus from the program, there were a couple of awards that were multi-year awards, and the Bridge Academy was one of those awards. They built into their proposal a step-down approach where they asked for more funding at the first year for startup, and then they indicated in their proposal how they would become self-sufficient and self-sustaining. So that is an approach that is many times requested in grants as well. So many of the providers would be aware of that kind of a model.
So I bring that up as what does this look like kind of shaping? I think it's a good idea to at least be an option. I agree with not the default, I think is how you phrased it. I certainly agree with that perspective. But as I'm assuming you guys will, if we all agree that this is a good idea, come to us with some kind of a policy to start to adopt. And as you start to, if that's the case, if we decide to do that, start to shape, what does that look like? Is this still a limited time, and whatever that looks like, not a 20-year funding source kind of a expectation. I assume that's what we're all talking about. Is that?
So,
I would believe that, yes, that's what we're talking about. It's a common practice in various kinds of human service grants to be a 2-year or a 3-year cycle. And then each year there's still reporting that's required. And then the next year's funding is still determined by whether or not those first year's deliverables were met. So I might suggest something similar to that rather than a blanket, every year. The other thing that I might suggest is that it's limited to the annual NOFOs and not the emergency or the emergent NOFOs.
yeah, I would think the emergent would be able to get them through long enough to apply for the annual.
Exactly.
Right.
Yes.
If they needed multi-year.
And as far as the time limitation, I think we were thinking through the longest it would be through the duration of the BHAP because their strategic priorities need to align.
So to Stephanie's point, there's current annual reporting then related to the grants that are being dispensed, including like the emergent needs as this new process comes forward? So,
There's actually monthly reporting.
monthly reporting.
They report to Ashwini directly every month.
And that was part of the recent kind of restructuring of it, was to get more regular updates.
Well, I love that. And I know when we met at the BHCC, just acknowledging the work you're doing to try and get those measurements to connecting the dots to outcomes on the public facing site, which would be super helpful. So thank you very much for that.
One side comment on the getting the information out to the public kind of thing. I've tried on 3 different browsers to get to the. No, I'm going to forget the website.
The dashboard. Oh,
The
the website?
the BHCC, not the county.
Yeah.
The other one, and all 3 times it comes up as security certificate problems, and 3 browsers won't let me get to it. So just FYI, it's out there. So maybe I don't have the right magic browser. I don't know, but it was on Chrome and Firefox and DuckDuckGo browsers.
And you were using the .com address?
Whatever
not a
was, there was a
.org.
link on the
Okay.
county website to it, and I was using that address,
Okay.
whatever that is.
Oh, I'll have to look into it.
Anyway, just
I was just going to ask if were there any further discussions on, I think we are all in agreement that we want to see some policy written, but to open it up for the annual NOFOs as an option, but not the default. Is that right? Okay, okay.
yeah. So if you're, I assume, come to us at some point in the future with a policy for us to discuss. Great.
Moving on to item 4B. Recommendation for the 2027 budget for the CJCC related to detention and behavioral health.
Move approval. Or what do you say? Move to discuss.
Well, I'll second, but did we need a vote on 4A first?
I
No.
apologize. I thought we were going to wait for policy to vote on. So let's vote now. We can vote.
I'm not the parliamentarian,
So, okay,
look at me.
so from the county rules and what would happen is that we either need to table it to the next meeting when the policy's in front of us, or we approve for the allowance of this content, but we want to see the language later. Like, it's up to you if you want to table it to the next meeting when we can look at actual language, or if you're comfortable, we can just vote as it is.
Whatever.
Would we need to, sorry, I forgot the mic. Would we need to amend to say approving this contingent upon policy?
I think it
or
would be
how does
better
your
just to
process-
table it,
Okay.
because that way we can take it up when we see the actual language, is my recommendation.
Just a point of clarification, tabling it may mean that it doesn't come back to this table until next year.
Mhm.
So would that impact your planning purposes?
Mhm.
Yes, because we would like to get the annual NOFO out in September.
So then I think maybe one of the other recommendations of approval with the understanding that policies will be reviewed when they're ready might be more beneficial for Kelly and her team.
I assume
Mike?
that would still require- sorry, thank
Yeah.
you.
Thank you. That would still require us to vote on it?
Well, typically this group, it manages the funding, not the operational policies.
Okay.
So it would be
But
with
it's a
your
funding
blessing.
policy, so that's kind of a weird area. Huh?
Mhm.
I'd like to be able to see it before we put it into play.
Okay. Then that
So
might
however,
require a
whether we-
special meeting
I was going to say,
for
can
you.
we do a special meeting?
It might
You
require
do
a
a
special
special
meeting, but as long as we have 3 present, the other 2 can join remotely. And then we can have a full meeting and try to do it very quickly.
I'm okay with that if you guys are.
So we should just table it to the next,
To a special meeting.
to a
So
special
that's a
meeting.
motion to table by Johnson.
Mhm.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Now moving on to item 4B.
Move approval or move to the table to discuss. Is that how your process works? We just say move approval. So, and then we start talking.
All right, so I'll second to bring it to the table.
Any discussion? And Kelly, are you sharing this?
So
Or
this
is Matt?
This is Mr.
Sheriff
Lane. I
Lane?
can help Mr. Lane if you'd like.
So I'll need some help. Sure.
Okay.
Does anybody have any specific questions about any item on the CJCC side of this?
I do have I do have a few, but I don't know if you were going to just talk to us generally and then get to specifics, or whatever you want to do, Matt.
I can do it either. I'll just go over it real quick.
Okay.
So a big part of this is employees. I have 10 correctional officers, 2 inmate service assessment specialists. And that's the 699, 564. And then their fringe benefits also. Operating supplies of $5,400. And a big part of this is vaccines, prescriptions, and non-prescription medication. What we give is long-lasting injections where it's applicable, and we can, because you don't have to worry about anyone cheeking medication. You don't have to, and they save it back, and then they may sell it
So cheek, yeah.
to someone else. Okay, so if we do injectables, there's no way to cheat the medication. And they can't save it up to try to get a new, to try to get more of an effect from it, and take 2 or 3 of them at one time that way. So the injectables is actually a much safer way and a much longer lasting result. So that is included in there.
If I could just interrupt real quick.
Go
So with medication for conditions that need the heavy antipsychotics, it is best if they take it consistently, not only time of day, but every day without skipped doses. So cheeking it, not taking it, storing it up, taking extra is very disruptive to the system and only further destabilizes people in the long run. So when you can bring someone in and get a 1 month, or we are now seeing 3 month injectables, where they only need to be seen like for the medicine delivery once a month, once a quarter. It just allows them to stay more stable. And it's just safer for everyone all around. And so they are more expensive, but it also provides a much better outcome for the people who are affected by this. So it's been something that we have been using, and it helps. I know that it helps when people are being released because it takes time to get in with the new provider. So if they've gotten their injectable, especially if it's a 3 month, but if they get their injectable a week before they're released, it gives them time to be stable as they're establishing services outside.
That's what, if you see the MAR program, that's part of that program. And we do get a grant also that helps us with that. And it helps to basically keep people well. And we make appointments and we give them a plan for when they're released from our custody so that they can succeed on the outside. And they can get in to see a provider to make sure they have updated prescriptions and maybe more injectables or whatever they need.
So, yeah, and there's a benefit to your employees as well from a labor cost perspective if you're doing something once a year instead of 30 times a year too. So those are the kinds of things that are going to be very helpful for you
Yes.
guys tracking all of that and, building that culture.
It's true.
Thank you for that detail. Mine were much more basic questions.
That's all right. That's all right.
But it's interesting I never heard the term cheeking before, and
Yeah.
wouldn't imagine that was a thing. But
Happens
now I know it's a thing.
every single day.
I bet.
We do our best.
I imagine
We
it
have
probably does.
techniques to make sure that it's taken correctly. Every once in a while, there's a new way to override or to outsmart that. So
Gotcha. Is there much of a cost difference between?
there's a big cost difference.
Okay. I'm assuming that's why you were sharing it with
Yes,
us.
that is correct.
Okay.
It's a large number because that's just what it costs us.
Gotcha.
And it's well worth the money as far,
Sounds like it.
like Miss Monty was saying, if I let someone out and they've taken a pill that day and it lasts for 24 hours, then tomorrow BPD or the normal PD or the sheriff's office may be dealing with them again and bringing them back.
Got it.
If we send them out with one of these longer lasting solutions, then it gives them a good head start on making themselves better
Gotcha.
when they get out.
That makes great sense. So really, thank you. That was most of the question. You covered one of my questions already. Perfect. Just pure budgetary. So in 26, it looks like we had the same amount budgeted and we're roughly 83,000 in. Do you anticipate using that?
Yeah,
The whole 325?
yes,
Okay.
every bit
So
of it.
we're just,
I don't know if because of the new financial system we have, I don't know if everything has been entered in through.
that's a general question I had is
Right.
Yeah.
as of what date are these numbers? Because I didn't see that anywhere and
So
I
this,
forgot.
I
Thanks.
think it was
for-
as of the end of July.
Oh.
These numbers were entered, but we saw that as well. We were surprised by the 2026 actuals being so low. And so we have reached out to the reset team to ask to make sure that they're coding the
Got in the right
medications
line
properly.
item.
Yeah.
And we
Okay.
did note that new staff did not know to code it in a certain way. So we will see updated numbers. I'm guessing they will use, last year they actually went over the amount that we allotted. And so I'm certain
Yeah.
they will use.
We usually
the
use
money.
every bit and then some. Yeah. So I can, and I will follow up on that too. Make sure that that's coded correctly and put in the system right.
Gotcha.
There were additional things on the second page.
Oh, I'm sorry. Where did I leave off? So mental health services is a big chunk. That covers our site contract, our mental health nurse, research services. That's Dr. Beck and his research. A lot has to do with recidivism and ties to mental health. And the court youth mentoring program, where they take troubled youth, like for instance, to the labor hall, and they get to see how different jobs, electricians, they get to wire a panel to give them an outlook on, you don't have to sit at a desk. You can go out, use your hands and do these things if you're not able to sit down. And, you know, some of them have attention span problems and all sorts of issues. So that's part of that program. Schooling and conferences is high, but I have a lot. This reset program, I will tell you, I've had several sheriffs that have inquired and come here and done a tour of our reset because it works well, and it's pretty much a model for this area. We do keep our people up on training, and that's a big part of this. At 72.5. Some of it's recertifications, some of it will be new certifications. And let's see.
I think the only other thing would be the 60,000 for the misdemeanor diversion wellness track.
Do you have more information?
I
on that?
do, and I
Okay.
actually have Judge Foley here as well.
Is that the
who-
contract services line?
Yes.
Yeah.
You knew I was going to ask about
I
that.
did. So we currently have an AOT program for felony court. We also have 3 problem-solving courts that help specialty populations that have a lot of mental health, substance abuse, or a combination of those problems. What we don't have is the same kind of services for people that we know are struggling with those same kind of behaviors, but they're on for a misdemeanor. And so there are some individuals who are just kind of a revolving door of getting arrested, going before a judge, getting to go home, and then just continually showing that they're not functioning well in the community and spending a lot of the court's time, getting their rap sheets getting longer and longer. And so Judge Foley and Judge McFarland had an idea to create the 60,000 would go to planning and modeling a misdemeanor assisted outpatient court, similar to the others that we do. Is there anything I've forgotten, Judge Foley?
they're arrested, they're non-detainable offenses because they're low-level misdemeanors, they're released, they go back in the community, they're not stable on medication, and the door comes up and they rack up 6, 7, 8 more. And at a certain point, it sticks and they're stuck and they're unfit to stand trial. So we have to order a fitness examination, which is not inexpensive. They might be held at Sheriff Lane's facility. When this program, it would be modeled similar to one that's ongoing in Winnebago County, where they're quickly identified. We identify them before there's fitness. If there's buy-in from the state's attorney and agreement to dismiss the charges, as long as they comply with a warm handoff and they immediately are connected with treatment. It's not as intensive as the problem-solving courts. We're not following them through 18 months or 24 months. The idea is just to get them stabilized and connected with services with the idea that they don't come back. I'm happy to answer any questions.
I just think that's another great example of something where there can be a really good, I know it's tedious, but a costing of the outcomes that you're impacting, because there are returns on investment of things like that that would be really useful, I think, to have out there on the reports. Thanks.
Just because I'm curious, and don't feel on the spot to come up with a big answer, but so the misdemeanors, you're seeing some need, or I guess lack of need, to follow them like you do some of the others? You mentioned like following them for 18 months, or we're just getting this off the ground and see where it goes?
Sure. So for those with serious mental illness and serious charges, like a felony, normally you'd be on felony probation for a minimum of 18 to 24 months. And so there's the need to follow them through there. Here, the idea, these are Class C misdemeanors, jailable for 30 days, Class Bs, 6 months. So they're really not as serious of offenses. The idea is to just kind of stop the cycle and get them from coming back over and over again. They're criminal trespass, they're camping out on someone's doorstep, or they keep going back to a business where they shouldn't be, those types of things primarily.
Yeah, I think it's one of the programs that, we see this sort of like stage interventions, and this is one of the lower level interventions, trying to, if we can catch it early enough and divert them, that would be the ideal because it's a lower cost, but having the other programs ready to catch them if they continue on that trajectory. So.
In case Ms. Reynolds reads this, because I haven't talked to her yet, if they don't comply, she has the option of obviously refiling the case and pursuing it to its conclusion. So I just want to make sure that it's not a free pass to get out of the criminal justice system completely. So.
I just had one additional question on the scope of work for Dr. Beck. Is that specific to the FUSE program, or is the scope broader than that? And I just was curious what his work is all about.
So his efforts are both with the CJCC and the BHCC, and the amounts listed here are specific to CJCC work as well as a grad assistant. It includes the cost for a grad assistant with that effort. He provides data for long-term projects to the CJCC at every meeting. His latest is included in your packet by Kelly, and it was on the FUSE program. This is the first step of his FUSE program review, but he does program analysis on any program that is recommended through CJCC or BHCC.
Very good. Thank you.
I have a couple for whoever this applies to. So I think it's page 16, the first page of the budget. On the revenue line, the 0400 accounts is it looks like unappropriated fund balance. What is that? And I'm seeing budgeted and then actuals of 0 and budgeted and actuals of 0. And don't know how that works or what that actually is.
So in the revenues, the unappropriated fund balance would be that fund balance that keeps getting reported. The 19 million, the 20 million that gets talked about. So that is funding that is coming out of that fund balance to help support this program based on our projected revenues that we are expecting to see from the city and the town. There would be a need to pull from that fund balance to support these plans. And it's zero because they make the adjustments at the end of the year.
Tell me more about that. I don't think I understand what that means.
Do you want to explain that, Kathy, how fund balance is transferred at the end of the year?
So if I
Talk about
understood, which I may not understand, for instance, on the 2025 adopted budget, you were budgeting 1.8 million to come from the current fund balance to meet the budget expenses that were forecasted in 2025. Okay. And then does the actual mean that you didn't use any of them for the actual expenses in 2025?
I'd have to go back and look, but usually there's not an entry done to fund balance. You'll just see it at the bottom where the expenses are more than the revenue. So that negative number, if there is one, is what comes out of fund balance.
And in looking at the totals for the actuals in that second column, the expense totals were only 1.4 million. And so there wasn't a need to use the fund balance because the programs did not use all of their budgeted amounts.
Okay. So that's kind of why I was asking. I followed it down to the bottom and going, okay, I don't know if that means that the actual expenses were the 1.457 and the revenues exceeded that. So there wasn't the need to draw down on the fund balance.
Correct.
So so I'm understanding that.
Yes.
Okay. Awesome. That's helpful. The second is and this may be your financial software update, but farther down, right below under the beginning of expense, it says full-time employees. And in 2026, the actual salaries and IMRF and everything is zero. And I know Sheriff Lane is paying Social Security and salaries and everything in 2026. I know he is.
That is another entry that is done at the end of the year.
Page 16.
So you're referring to 2026 actual numbers?
Yeah, 2026 actual, and we can start at 0503.0001.
Right. Those are salaries that are paid out of the general fund.
Okay.
And then the shared sales tax reimburses the general fund at the end of the year
So you don't reflect the ongoing?
throughout the year.
Yeah. Or you're saying from an accounting perspective, you're doing an adjusting entry at the end of the year?
Yes.
Okay. All right. It would be helpful for us to see if we're making budget decisions, at least some sense of what that is, and if we're overshooting it if we're overshooting it or undershooting or where we are. If we're making budget decisions here, at least in part on that. And then
Historically, we have spent more than what is budgeted.
Okay, that's helpful to know. And part two of that is, I'm assuming that is full-time employee salary related to mental health services. Okay.
Yes.
I assumed the yes was the answer, but
Yes, that is correct.
that's all the questions I have on that.
So I just want to, on the clarification on that line though, for the IMRF, the 2027 budgeted amount is down. And if I remember correctly, that is because the IMRF rate went down. Is that correct? That's why we're dropping.
That is correct. We get an annual amount from the state and it is down from last year.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Any further discussion or questions? Do I have a motion?
You have them, yeah.
So do we vote? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? The motion passes. On to 4C, recommendation for 2027 budget for the Community Behavioral Health Initiatives from the BHCC. Kelly?
So I'll
Move approval.
I'll
Move to
second.
the floor.
I'll second.
All right. So our budget is divided into salaries, supplies, and services. I guess we'll start by asking if there's any questions or if you want me to go through it by section or.
Yes, I have a question. When there are action items like the FUSE program that may in part be reimbursable by Medicaid, how does that work? How does that money flow work?
Right now, we don't have Medicaid reimbursement. So we haven't dealt with that. I can't speak to what would happen if we did get Medicaid reimbursement.
Thank you. And I know you asked for questions in advance, and I apologize. I didn't get a chance to read the packet until starting yesterday and today. So it's been a little bit of a busy week since you sent that over to us. I remember just having that as a note in a prior meeting, and then a reference in an article about that the FUSE program potentially had some potential for Medicaid recovery and financial sustainability, and not really a question looking back, just really trying to just educate myself on when and if that does happen, how would that work? We can take that offline for another conversation if you like. It's just something that came to mind in preparing for the meeting.
So staff has been working with a local provider to assist with trying to get Medicaid reimbursement. It's a very complicated process and one that our current EMR doesn't support. So Kelly and her team have been working with a local provider to get assistance with that. From a bookkeeping standpoint, I don't know enough about Medicaid and Medicaid submissions, but from a bookkeeping standpoint, we would follow the same process that we do in our health department. And so then that would be put into a separate fund because we cannot commingle the mental health and public safety fund with other revenues. And so that would go into a separate fund that would offset the cost first before they'd be charged into a program code for mental health and public safety. So there is capability within our current EMR software, since we've recently upgraded, that we could parse that out so that the first line of payment is reimbursed from Medicaid, and then the remainder would come out of mental health and public safety. So that is the goal eventually that they're working on.
Thank you very
You're welcome.
much.
Any other questions?
Do you want to just go through it or do you want questions?
I can go through it if you like.
Sure.
Okay. So the first section is salaries. So we have the salaries, IMRF, Social Security contributions. Any questions there?
I guess from the accounting perspective, so why I was confused is this budget shows apparently year-to-date 2026 salaries, bennies, and perks, and the other budget did not. So I'm sure.
So that is because the behavioral health employees are paid out of that fund, out of the mental health and public safety fund.
They have their own department.
They have their own department within that fund.
Okay, and so similar question on the next page, 0706-0004, the 70,000 contract services RUM is showing 0 for this year so far.
On page 20.
Yes, ma'am.
So there's Been 20,474 in expenses.
He's looking at wrong.
Oh, at rum? Rum, that is the rent. And that again is paid at the end of the year.
Okay, so I'm not used to some numbers being there as an accumulating, year to date and
They pay
some
it,
not being there at
yeah,
all.
they pay it in a lump sum at the end of the year.
Okay. So it's effectively billed to the department kind of
Correct.
is that, okay. Thank you.
I mean, just a suggestion on that, if that were footnoted in the future and, maybe, there's an opportunity for us to understand that, without asking and just might save time. So, thanks.
Okay, the next section is supplies. Are there any questions related to that section? That would be page 19. Yeah, that'd be page 19. Okay. Moving on, page 20 is services. Important to note that mental health services, the 0706.0002, that would be where those grants come into place, that annual NOFO, the emerging. It also covers professional development. So we're looking at holding 4 trainings next year. It includes a contract for psychiatric services from Carl. That's what's comprised in that figure.
Does that account for all 2.61 million?
Yes.
So let me ask a
Do you want a rough breakdown?
a slightly more nuanced question to help
Yeah.
you be able to answer what I actually want to know. So you gave us some contract stuff and some trainings planned, I'm assuming, and you talked about NOFOs. What's the breakdown of the NOFO targets?
Sure.
Not a different question that I've been asking for 3 or 4 years already. So
Nope, you're good.
I assumed you were prepared.
Kind of our preliminary thinking is that 504,000 would go to emerging needs, and that would be done 4 quarters again, just like we did this year. The rough breakdown of that is 126,000, which varies depending on the proposals that we get in. The annual NOFO would be 1.764 million, and that would include any multi-year, that amount that we would determine and present to you guys. Professional development, we're looking at 60,000. That would be 2 ACT trainings, which is acceptance commitment therapy. One of those would be youth focused. Family systems training would be the third, and the fourth would be cognitive process therapy or CPT training. And then the psych services from Carl contract is 30,000. And that totals the 2.61 million.
Thank you very much. Going forward, if possible, I noticed in the CJ budget there was some breakdowns of a few of those. That would be super helpful for us to have that so we see what makes up 2.6 rather than just a big bucket with 2.6 million in it. That would be very, very helpful. Thank you. So the 1.7 in NOFO, we're by tenets of agreements, et cetera, supposed to align with the behavioral health action plan.
Mm-hmm.
Are we targeting specific things there? Do we have specific recommendations that we're going for, or how are we breaking up 1.7?
They submit a proposal to us, providers, and indicate where in the behavioral health action plan their proposal aligns. So essentially they tell us. Our requirement to them is that it needs to align in what those priorities are.
So we don't have funding recommendations that we're targeting to fulfill.
That would be an Ashwini question, I think.
I mean, as long as it aligns. Or in our evaluation.
Other side.
And then our evaluators will make a determination if they agree that the proposal aligns with the BHAP.
I would ask and note that the BHAP includes the 1.7 plus the 60 for the workforce development. So it's the total of those. And do you have the breakdown by the categories in terms of what was recommended amount by category?
I do not.
I believe that's what Mr. McCarthy is asking for.
Yeah, so my understanding is of the details behind that I've been able to keep up with is that the work groups were representative of categories within the behavioral action plan. They were to make recommendations about funding specifically. So how do we get from a general plan to actually making funding decisions? And so I think that speaks to what Ms. Parrish is saying is, do we have recommendations and what's our target for spending on specific areas, or do we have those at all?
So workforce did have their recommendation after they met for those trainings, and Samantha put together what roughly that would cost. Our access group recommended the multi-year funding, and so we went with that and tweaking the application a little bit to where they could explain some of that, but we didn't go into amounts. Yes, outreach. That's Samantha.
The community outreach group has put together a few efforts that we're working on. None of them are monetary. I did want to mention that a portion of the, and you maybe can talk more, but a portion of the NOFO is set aside for housing and unhoused. I don't remember, 70%. Let me take that back. Don't quote that. But there is a portion of the NOFO that is set aside for permanent supporting housing. So we look for those coming in the NOFO. The rest of those pillars that access outreach are within there as well, if that makes sense.
Ashwini, do you have that breakdown?
I believe last year we had a specific breakdown for shelter or homelessness in the different categories like service access and community engagement. For this year, because we saw that roughly the applications aligned with that, we decided to have a larger portion and then see how the applications come in.
So if I understand correctly, you were leaving it more open to see what the response from the community is so that you're not limiting a good project that might not have the funding available if you portioned it out into categories.
Yes.
You know, for the future, I just wonder if, there's an opportunity for like a hybrid approach there, because as you develop and mature these metrics that you're looking to hit, to be able to show the impact of the IGA on the community and mitigating and improving overall mental health in the community, in the county, if you were to put out some that are specific with your hypothesis as to a target, a metric that you'd like to see improvement on. I think that's one of the reasons why it's been so easy for me in answering a lot of questions from the city of Bloomington to talk about the FUSE program, because there's a clearly stated hypothesis. You're moving the needle on that. I think that's very prudent to say, there may be great ideas that we haven't heard about. And at the same time, as you build out that scorecard, there may be some things where you think, we're losing ground on this, or maybe there's really an opportunity if we focus on that we'll be able to make a difference that people can see in a tangible way.
And I think that that opportunity bears out as the action plan is updated and reviewed. Um, I think that there's benefit to allowing providers to be able to apply for funds to support communities as they're aware of them, because it may be a skill set or an expertise or a community that otherwise might be missed.
Yeah, I think I'm agreeing with you. I'm just saying it a little bit differently in that, some might be set aside for a very strategic intent to make a difference in one specific area. That's, kind of in my mind, I didn't explain very well what I meant when I said a hybrid approach.
I think that's a great idea because I think they've found great success in doing that with workforce development. And of course, it's a lot easier to say we want to put on these 4 specific trainings that are lacking in our community and that our providers are begging for. And then the metric is how many we're able to attend, and then how many sessions or how many clients are they seeing with that. So then how many people in the community are then benefiting from that training. So that workforce development is a little bit easier to show those metrics. I think it's a little more difficult in some of the more broad topics maybe, or the ones that don't have as clear of objectives within that topic. So, but I think that's definitely something that could be worked on. And as you guys are developing these, tying those to a dollar amount, or at least a specific metric that you want to receive back, if not a dollar amount.
I'm just going to follow on with that and agree with what I think I heard. My thought process and understanding as we've come along on FAC and the evolution of this is that the NOFOs were for specific categories of spend related to priorities identified in the Behavioral Health Action Plan, and that the emergent needs was for all the other things that don't neatly fit into there, but are clearly needed and make space to be able to try to support those, whether they're startup or somebody lost funding or whatever. And so, to Ms. Motney's point is I've been looking for those. I've been looking for where our priorities is these 3 categories, and we're going to make the money, and we're going to put out, I don't know who said permanent supportive housing, but I'll use that because it got thrown out and we know we need it in the community. And so although that certainly is a narrow focus and a lot of providers will be left out of that specific, but it is one of our largest needs, and it's a notice to the community, hey, we are really serious about this, and here's money for this project. And with the idea that we would have more success in those highest areas of need within our community. And so that's what I've been looking for and asking for over the last 3 or 4 years. I've been asking this question, is that the funding opportunities are directly tied to specific funding priorities in the Behavioral Health Action Plan. And then all you smart providers tell us what those are, because I don't know what those are other than everybody's, when it gets to fever pitch at the community comment section, then we all know what those are. But before that point. So I'm asking for what are those funding priorities and how are we specifically going out with a rough amount of dollars? I'm not asking you to tell me to the dollar or to the penny or anything silly like that, but we're going to roughly a third of that 1.7 is going to permanent supporting housing, NOFO interest, a third to this other thing or whatever you guys all decide. And that's what I've not heard yet.
So I would say that when you go back, if we go back and look at the design of the 3-year mental health action plan, the behavioral health action plan, as we're now calling it, is that those are stating the priorities of the organization. And so I can understand some hesitancy of saying, well, we're going to earmark 70% for housing year after year, because there may be somebody that comes forward with a different program and it would require a special meeting for us to come back and reallocate if it's designated. Does that make sense?
It does, but we are making 1-year funding decisions on a 1-year budget. We're not making multi-year unless you guys come up with a plan that we all agree. so I'm not suggesting multi-year commitment to a specific funding priority. In fact, I thought that was part of the subgroup work and the annual budget is to say every year, the smart providers tell us it's a different funding priority this year. It's not permanent supportive housing. It's, I don't know, you guys come up with another one. So I'm not suggesting that we lock ourselves into multi-year. I'm suggesting is that annually we should be having that conversation and earmarking specific dollars for the most, urgent needs from a systemic perspective. So we let the system know we're serious about this and we want you to step up and make some differences and get money in their hands to do just that.
Yeah, and I don't disagree. I mean, this was the first year that we had the work groups, and I think they're still kind of feeling out what does it mean to set this. And these are providers that have never really had the opportunity to say we want very firmly like X. So I think that's good feedback to go back to them to say we'd like more clearer, we'd like more very specific direction on these particular funding priorities. But right now the guidance is trying to use the Behavioral Health Action Plan as the stated priorities, the known issues, the known needs of the community. And it'll be interesting. So yes, I think that we need to go back with that feedback to the groups, the work groups, to say we want more specifics.
Well, I certainly think in the budgeting process too, right, is however efficient the public input process or the provider input process is working. It's certainly fair. But in the whole process and principally why I withheld support last year and why I'm very hesitant this year is because there's a big pot of money and no plan effectively for what the funding priority is. And so, how do we accomplish writ large, mental health services system level change and growth and development if we're not saying this is our funding priority and here's a bunch of money for that specific purpose. And I see general NOFOs going out with no specific, it's kind of an all call, whoever needs some money for something they're trying to get done. That's not us being strategic, saying these 1, 2, 3 things are our most important thing. And we want proposals on those 3 things. That's not that. That's us just shotgunning money into the community and saying, who has a need? And not knocking their programs. I'm sure they're important and helpful, but strategically that doesn't get us to an ROI and a measurement of what we're trying to accomplish overarchingly, which back to when we first heard this, approach from the county back then, it was a strategic, how do we start to expand services and improve mental health care overarchingly? And the struggle from my perspective is how are we connecting dollars to actual services that we're funding that improves and we can, to Ms. Montney's point, produce an ROI that says so. Because right now that to me it seems, at least from the information I'm being provided, that is disconnected. We don't have a connection between strategic funding priorities and funding decisions.
I think the connection though is the Behavioral Health Action Plan. That drives and the proposals have to align with that. And in fact, almost all of the proposals we've received over the course of the year mark access as their number one. They have to check which box it aligns with, and almost all of them check access.
What does access mean?
Access to services, making those services more accessible to the population, or improving access to something which includes permanent supportive housing. So yeah.
It includes, providers, wait lists, those kinds of things. As far as, there's been discussion that's gone on quite a while about not wanting the county to be the service provider. And so if the county is not going to be the service provider, then our NOFOs are at the whim of what the community organizations are willing to put forward. So it's a little more difficult to be strategic. So I understand what you're trying to say, but I also am looking at logistically, we cannot dictate to organizations what they do. We are a little at the whim of what they bring to us and what their vision is for the populations that they're seeing, for the people that are falling through the cracks. Because really that's what this funding is for, is where are we missing the population. What population are we missing? What services are they needing so that we can can step in and meet those needs? But so if the county is not going to be the one designing and implementing programs, we are a little at the whim of what the community is willing to bring forward to request for that. So it's a little harder.
And I appreciate that. And again, you guys are all the smart providers who know the needs infinitely better than I do. But if we don't establish funding priorities, then the system doesn't have the opportunity to respond. And so if we stay with, we're going to fund whatever they bring, how do we get to where we're going to go if we don't tell them where we want to go? And I think that's part of the problem. And I do hear that the mental health action plan, behavioral health action plan, old acronyms die hard. Behavioral health action plan is in effect a prioritization document because it has 4 categories. But as Ms. Johnson said a little bit earlier, what's important to spend money on can change year to year based on what's going on in the community. So in and of itself, it's not a funding priority. It's a need priority document. It's not a funding priority document. And that's what I asked last year is how do we get from a need-based document to a funding priority? What's our process? And we said, well, we have ideas last year is what the answer I got from Rita, which is fine. But we're still in the space of we have need ideas, but we need funding priorities. And that's what I don't see in the materials that I have here is here's a bucket of 1.7. We're not sure what we're going to spend it on. We're going to see what everybody shows up with and decide which ones are the best. And that's tough. If I'm a provider, that's got to be super tough. How is my proposal going to be ranked against all the other proposals that show up? How do I make mine competitive and know? Because I've heard from a couple of providers that have done multiple year and have never been funded. And so how are they supposed to? And so there's that aspect I've heard from some providers. And then from our side is where are we going?
I think the difficulty for staff is if you have, it's 5 priority areas, right? For the current strategic plan. So we have 5 priority areas. And so moving that to a dollars and cents funding priority, it would be difficult for staff to say access to care is more important than housing or housing is more important than workforce development. And so back to Ms. Johnson's comment, letting them know that these are the 5 areas and you have to make an eloquent argument that it fits and is going to move the needle in one of those 5 areas is the responsibility of the person who's making the proposal. And I think many of the proposals that have not been funded is because they were not able to establish a clear link to those 5 priority areas established. So that's putting a lot of pressure on a small staff to then decide which one is more important. I think they do get feedback from the work groups, but not one work group over another saying, this is the area we want to fund this year. So if that's the direction of the FAC that you'd like the work groups to kind of rank those in a different way for future years, that is something that I think you could look at with your work groups to try to fund the rank the priority areas of which would receive preferential treatment. You could work that into a rubric for scoring for the evaluators. So that is something that could be developed. I just think that'll be difficult and could potentially leave a really good proposal out of a funding opportunity. But I see what you're saying. I do see what you're saying. And I've seen other foundations who really do hone in on 1 or 2 priority areas and that's what they fund. So I see what you're saying.
Yeah. Well, just again, continuing really asking for your input on this too. I mean, I looked at some of the grants that are being awarded. Of course, the opportunity maybe for collaboration because some of them are folks that we are also funding through CDBG and through John M. Scott, that maybe there's an opportunity to kind of, think about oh, this is a priority this year for the city of Bloomington. And so maybe we're going to be emphasizing that. And it would just be something I think that we could all build relationships around. My question for you directly is kind of two-part. The first part is, were there proposals that you had hoped to see this time around that you didn't? Maybe ideas that you had that you felt would be very impactful in this community, and then in those that raised their hand and sent something into you, maybe nothing lined up to that. And then the second part of the question is, maybe tell us, some examples of proposals that you turned down, and what was that all about?
I may call on Ashwini to help with some of that since she's our grants program manager, but I didn't really see anything that was glaringly missing. We got a lot of good proposals, and it was really humbling, I guess, to see how much thought and effort went into some of these proposals and the exciting work that we got to fund. The ones that didn't get funded primarily were because there were elements missing. And in the rubric, if you don't submit a budget, if you don't submit, some of those checklist things, you lose points very quickly. And we've worked with those folks to give feedback on what was missing, what they could do differently. Maybe if it didn't align because it really wasn't emerging. The quarterly emerging grants aren't handed out willy-nilly. You have to demonstrate that you had an abrupt disruption of funding that you could not have expected. So they're not for startups. They're not for anything like that. It is really for last resort. There's not another way. They've exhausted funding. And the annual NOFO is different. They're very separate and unique, but I don't think we saw or we're looking for anything that we didn't receive, I guess. I think multi-year funding will be helpful for those bigger projects, especially the supportive housing. The bridge has indicated that they are very interested in multi-year funding. So I expect that projects with bigger budgets will be interested in multi-year funding and may come forward where they may have been hesitant before.
Thank you very much.
So as I recall, not last year, because last year we did not have amounts yet, but in the prior year, we actually had an estimated breakdown by the BH plan priorities. Right? Am I okay?
That was the first year of the FAC. Sorry, thank you.
Keep me honest. That was the first year of the FAC, and the first time, or the beginning of the plan redo and the introduction of Heartland into the mix. And they did a kind of a summary, but not a full plan. And we talked about, we had zero input because the plan was just getting started and the FAC was just getting started. And so it was a timing thing, is what we discussed in 2025 or 2024. Then last year, as you recall.
My apologies. It must have been Marita's reports after.
Just don't want to dominate. So I from a line by line, I think that was it, and mostly on this, and our, my concern is, my role here is as a fiduciary agent for the town of Normal. I'm here to make sure that the money's being spent in accordance with all the tenets of Behavioral Action Plan and the IGA and all of the things. That's my role, as I understand it, from the mayor of town of Normal, who put me on this. So the difficulty is when there's a number that says 1.7 and it doesn't map to anything that I can discern, then I don't have an accountable, transparent thing to say, yes, it is, or no, it isn't. And, and that is in fact my responsibility to say, yes, it is, or no, it isn't. And that's basically my whole function, as I understand it from my organization. And so it's hard for me to go, 1.7, 2.6, 900,000 is for the things that you guys told me about. Okay, check. I know where 900,000 is going, but 1.7, I have no idea where that's going. And that's very hard for me to say, okay, I'm on board wherever it's going to go, when I can't, there's no way, because you all take that and you go behind a closed door and you do your thing. And we don't see that. We don't see what the proposals are. So again, accountability and spend are disconnected, and I don't have a way to connect those. And that's why I withheld my support last year on this budget, is because there wasn't the way to connect transparency and accountability with funding decisions, because it all happens somewhere else and we don't see those proposals. And as far as I know, they aren't published anywhere, all the proposals that come in. And so which ones are in the no pile and which ones are in the yes pile, and we don't see any of that. And so there is no transparency to this at all.
Well,
And so we're at very difficult, I assume you're in the same position, but I won't talk for you. But in talking with my leadership, that's a problem for us.
So the approved projects are published. They have been since the beginning in reports that Kelly and Marita put forward. So those are available and are public. Those come to the county board executive committee. And now we're making sure that the city and the town, when we realize that those reports were not being picked up that way, we're making sure that they're forwarded on to all Bloomington and Normal council. I think the disconnect is that the responsibility for looking at the NOFO and assigning those to subject matter experts who will then review those is the responsibility of paid staff, not the responsibility of this group.
Agreed.
And so if you're wanting to approve dollar amounts, so I guess I am a little confused at what you're really asking for.
Mhm.
If you're asking to assign a dollar amount to each priority, that could be done by this group today. If you're asking to approve each proposal, that's the responsibility of someone else, and then they would have to come back here. So if you wanted to make those decisions as part of the annual budget process, they would need to release the NOFOs in, I don't know how that would work, because that would be putting the cart before the horse, because you would be looking at the proposals, want to approve the proposals, then have this meeting.
Do not want to approve
No, but I
proposals,
think-
and never would I suggest us do staff work. That's what the department exists for.
Mhm.
Primarily one of their things, but the disconnect completely. Funding priorities, yes. And so but we're seeing this already play out. It's already happening the way you're describing. We get a budget, you tell us a number. You said 2.2, according to this, 529,000 got spent. So does budget always
Yeah.
bear out in reality? No.
So the
Mhm.
report from last week's meeting that I believe was it sent to the council members yet? Have we started that yet?
The report that you give to the executive committee, was that sent out?
Oh, no.
So the reports from the BHC are in the executive packet and they are published online. One of the things that had been requested and is being worked on right now and is live is the dashboard on the BHCC webpage, not the county's, but the BHCC's webpage, which highlights who the award went to, what it was, how much they've spent, how much they haven't, what's a percentage of that, like of what they've spent that they were allocated for. And it really targets like which section of the behavioral health action plan is it involved with. And so at the most recent BHCC meeting, it was very brief, but Ms. Harrell did go over that and show us where it was. I'm sorry that you weren't there to see it, but it was there, and she kind of talked us through. I did recommend that because not everybody was there, so make a video to tell people how to access it, because for me it wasn't it's not a dashboard like it doesn't look like this. Like it's one of these drop down menus per category, and you can see what's being done. But a lot of the feedback has been taken in to try to make it more accessible and to make it more transparent. Part of this year, what we saw was the NOFO process and the emergent need process, and how the individuals who are reviewing were making sure that it was aligned with the behavioral health action plan as part of the accountability. And so I would be interested to see what your take on that and get some feedback from you on what you see on the dashboard and in the reports. And if we want to continue to make it better, that's one thing, but it is there. That's the point I'm trying to make.
The fundamental difference between what I'm talking about, and I think if I understand what you're telling me, is before and after. You're talking about after, I'm talking about before. We're here to make a funding decision, and essentially you're sliding numbers across in a table and say yes or no, even though you don't know what it's going to do.
Well, I believe what Ms. Taylor said, that if you would like to actually earmark it within that 1.7 to the funding priorities, that we could do that here if you wanted today.
Well, and that's, so you asked me what, the difference, and certainly not proposal level. And I don't think that would be appropriate. I don't have the skill set to do that and don't want to do that, frankly. But again, my understanding, back to what I said a bit ago, was the smart providers would give us an indication every year, what is the most important things. I mean, we have to make a decision on how we spend this money. And so if we're missing it, okay, we're 12 months off, and we can correct that problem the next year in funding priorities. But that doesn't preclude, and today it doesn't preclude any proposal from being ignored.
Oh, yes, it does. It has to fit in with those 5 priorities. So you have 5 priorities, but I guess
I was
question-
assuming fundamental tenets of following it has to follow the behavioral action plan. I mean,
right.
Hopefully not too many people are putting in proposals even yet today. So that wouldn't change from assigning funding priorities during the budget process and evaluating whether or not they meet, behavioral action plan versus what happens today. Today, people throw proposals in, and you evaluate whether or not they meet the tenets of the behavioral action plan. That wouldn't be any different.
Correct.
We would just be establishing funding priorities to say, I'm going to kick permanent supportive housing again just because somebody brought it up, and it's important. I think that would be a great one for this effort to say, hey, we know this is important. We know there's a big need. We have some temporary, the bridge. One of their challenges, there's no place for bridge people to go. That would be a great thing for this body to say, here's money for that specific purpose. Does that generate proposals? I don't know. I don't know.
I think it limits it to 1
Sure.
or 2 providers. So,
Sure.
but I guess I don't attend the work group sessions, so I guess I'd want to hear from staff or from someone who does attend those work groups is what is coming to the top from those conversations of work. Like if this group wants to identify priorities and to assign certain dollar amounts to each priority, that could happen today, but it would be very limiting and difficult, I think, to keep to.
I agree that this group trying to set dollar amounts to specific things may be unintentionally negatively impacting where dollars really could be utilized. I think, using supported permanent housing as an example, there may already be funds and opportunities for that to be funded another way, leaving the county funds to be utilized in other ways that would be more effective. And so my concern about this body trying to say, well, we're going to earmark, 1 million to housing and 300 to this, is that we don't have all of the information about what other opportunities are out there and what might be a better way for agencies to blend funding, right? Be able to obtain it from the state or from a foundation and some from the county to blend together to make a program more effective or more able to impact our community. And by us trying to limit certain amounts to specific kinds of activities, I think we run the risk of in a year going, well, we couldn't spend what we had allocated, or we couldn't get proposals that would actually meet the need the way that we thought we would.
I hear what you're saying, that we'd be narrowing the funnel. I got it. But we're already not spending what we're putting out there. We put 2.55 out 2 years ago and spent 1.55. So far this year, we put 2.2 and spent 500,000. So we're already not spending what we're putting in these buckets. And for next year, we're allocating the biggest allocation we've ever done, and we're not spending it. And so I don't think there's a risk. And if there's if there's, to use the term hybrid, here's two things that we're going to fund, and there's this open BHAP open, funding too, fine. But at least we're establishing funding priorities that we know are needed in this community, and we're letting them know, because honestly, until we put a stake in the ground and say, we want you guys to build this stuff and here's money, I don't know that we're going to get the response in the direction that we want. Will it come year 1 or 2? I don't know. And again, I agree with you 100%. I don't know that we are the people to establish those things. That's why I keep saying, you smart providers, to tell us what those funding priorities should be. And as an elected official, I don't feel equipped to make those kind of recommendations at all. I'm not.
I think one of the things that I had been considering or maybe just under the impression of was that we would be looking at each of the categories of the BHAP and maybe looking more towards which categories may be more prioritized. So we have workforce that already has a set amount that you guys are thinking to allocate for those trainings. We have service and access, which I would assume is the largest pot because that covers most of the service array. We have prevention and recidivism, which most of that tends to live under the CJCC side of things, but not all. And then we have the outreach and education, which Sam has already indicated that they're working on a number of things, but there's really no funding demand to that. So if that's how we're thinking about this, then we have a set amount already in mind for workforce. And then we have service and access as the absolute largest pot. And then prevention and recidivism, if we want to have a separate amount allocated for programs specifically targeting that group and that population. I am much more comfortable with the concept of saying service and access needs the most because that's where we're going to have the biggest impact, or this much needs to go to workforce or whatever. I'm just very uncomfortable with the idea of saying our community needs X and that's where we're going to put it. Because I think from my knowledge and my experience and that of our entity and our agencies, our community needs so many X's.
Agreed.
And I don't disagree that permanent supportive housing is a huge need in our community. But I think there's also so many needs. And from a provider standpoint right now, and I do recognize I will share as a provider on one of those work groups, we didn't feel equipped to say, well, our work group needs this much money for services. Like that felt very awkward for us as providers in those work groups. So we didn't put forth a pot of money that should go to this particular arena. As a matter of fact, the workforce group said, here's the trainings we recommend, and left it to the department to do the research and figuring out what those would cost us. And so
Getting on.
Getting microphone trouble. No, I think that's the right partnership. Providers talk about largest needs. Department helps shush out the budget. We go, that sounds good, because we can see what your priorities are, and you guys have put a dollar amount to them, and you guys have given them what you think are the most important things. That's what I thought was happening and been looking for.
Well, just to chime in, I know that we were, as the work groups were kind of coming out with their product, getting ready for budget, we were also in the transition of a new director. And so I think this is very valuable feedback for you. And I hope that that gives you some comfort level in starting to assign that as the department head. Do you think that that's something that, I guess my question to the city and the town representatives is, how urgent is it that that needs to be settled before voting on the budget this year?
Do you want to weigh in?
Well,
I've talked enough, I think.
No, I think, I mean, it's been really helpful to just, sit here and listen, try to take it all in, right? I mean, there's a quote that I love and I often find victim to in my own work, which is there's no correlation between activity and progress, and when you have a gigantic opportunity, I mean, such as what was aspirationally stated in the original IGA for this, which is a common goal for everyone. And yet there are different roles that we do play, toward getting that goal. And I think these conversations about, refining how we go about this is very helpful. I wouldn't feel equipped to make those decisions, but I will say on June 22nd and July 20th, I sat here and, took a lot of questions that I couldn't answer about what are you looking forward to supporting? How is it going to break down across all of these areas? And I know many of you may have watched that meeting. I mean, certainly some opportunity to understand what is our focus. And that doesn't mean other things aren't important. And that doesn't mean those other activities don't take place. But the more we can refine areas of focus, one or two, I think then that we could look back next year and not feel like, wow, we had a lot of activity, but we aren't feeling the impact. I don't know if that is making sense. I was listening to some folks talk that work on it's not really like a foundation, but they give, grant money too. And they're talking about, do we give a little to everyone? Or do we think about, what are we really trying to accomplish in alignment with our mission? I don't know if, Kevin, if that resonates with you. I mean, we do have different roles. And it's very awkward for that because sometimes I feel like, it's been contentious in the last year that I've been involved with this group, but really it's just a common goal, but different roles. And the more we can get these processes clarified, then the more we can unleash the power of collaboration so that we can look back and feel like we've accomplished something meaningful. There's nowhere else I found in the US and trying to look and understand, people who have taken this on. It's very aspirational, the folks in 2016. And I mean, their hearts were in it. I watched the meeting. I mean, everyone was like really, really motivated for this. So it's a great opportunity to step back and just think about like, how do we be more strategic? And it is really hard. I have a lot of empathy for the providers who, we can't help too, but as human beings, think about how does this impact me and my mission and my business and that sort of thing. But that's where I think it's incumbent upon us to figure out, how do we get that degree of clarity? And it probably doesn't involve, program specific, but it's certainly more than what we're equipped with today, because I will say that those meetings were pretty uncomfortable for me. And, I spent a lot of time studying, and yet still I was ill-equipped to be able to satisfy the need. So I don't know if that's helpful, Kevin, but, those are my thoughts. And I want, so I apologize for interrupting you. I was going to take my microphone off, and then I thought, well, just one more thing. If we are going to get back together in a few days or something on this other topic, or did we agree that we're not going to need a special meeting for the other discussion item that we had? I was going to
Well,
say.
I think we're going to have a special meeting, but I don't think it was going to be within a matter of days. I was not what I
Okay.
was thinking.
Okay.
I'm not sure if it'll be done.
I just thought it would give you an opportunity to like breathe and think about, what do I think we should do? Anyway, that was all.
I do want to, if it's okay, I do want to mention one thing just on a statement that I heard earlier before anybody moves on too much. Versus what was budgeted and what has actually been spent on your numbers. The budget, the 2.2, the 2.1, but you're seeing that there's only been about 579,000 spent. I'm sorry that those numbers don't reflect a little bit more. Part of it is just how the invoicing comes in with the contracts, but just to make it a little bit more clear, with our annual NOFO that went out, we have those contracts that were all approved total up to 1.55 million and 50 cents. Our quarter one totals up to 185,000. I apologize for not remembering quarter two. Our quarter three is currently being evaluated. But my point is, if you do approve that 2.6, we will be spending all of it, or as close to all of it as possible. We don't want any of that money left on the table. And if it's allowed, that's whatever number is approved in that, we will be putting back into the community. So I again, just pointing out that the 26 budgeted versus the actual spent aren't what's actually been pledged for this year.
And I think Ms. Harrell makes a good point, because like when you look at the report that came out in executive committee, is that this is not the awarded amount, this is the actual spent amount. And there are like 175,000 for supportive housing with CHS that they haven't accessed yet because, I'm sorry. Yeah, because they are, I think, out for bid at this point to build Sue's Landing. So that's 175,000 that will come due all at once, but it's not indicated that it's spent yet, but it is allocated.
Yeah, everything except quarter four and quarter three emerging has been allocated and is under contract. And Ashwini puts out the dashboard every month on what's been spent and has conversations, so we know if there's delays and things, since that NOFO funding wasn't available in January, so some of them couldn't even start getting bids or getting real serious about their spending plan until middle of the year. And so we're just starting to see some of those things be invoiced too. So that's why this year our plan was to get that out the door, that notice, that NOFO out there, so that when board approves the budget, we can go the following month and, have funds available in January so we can facilitate an earlier spend down. So you can see true reflections, by June, there should be half spent, and we're not at that 500,000. So given these buckets with workforce already allocated for $1 or for $1 amount, outreach not needing a budget, other than that leaves service access and delivery and prevention and recidivism. Are you looking for a dollar amount for that bucket, or are you looking for someone to determine within access what a focus is? Because in last year's NOFO, there was 1.1 million called out for supportive and permanent housing. for supportive housing, and then everything else was open. And we did get that with the bridge, and I think lifelong access, their SILA program was 600,000 and the bridge was the remainder of that. Those were the two proposals that filled that 1.1.
I mean, I guess, it's just listening to this last part of the conversation, I'm less concerned about, we had this much money in here, we're going to spend that much money no matter what, right? Because for me, it's about tying these things to impact. And that's where this whole thing gets to for me in terms of just equipping me to be able to speak about that. These are our priorities, and this was what we're supposed to, get for it. This is our hypothesis. We spent it, we did it, and now this is what happened, and this is the impact on the community. And I hope that's helpful. It is tough. It does put us in a tough position when I'm going to go back and say the amount is going to be increased to 2.2. What is that for? We need to just trust them because I don't know. I'm just kind of role playing with myself there, but it does feel like that's where I was in these last couple conversations. But hopefully that's helpful. Again, common goal, just different roles, and how can we continue to refine the process so that we can, build that trust and better collaborate to make a difference in the community.
So I'll go back to my original question is there something that needs to happen today that would increase your comfort level with voting on this item? From either Ms. Amigoni or from us as a board, as a committee?
Enough. I don't want to kick a dead horse. Or that's probably a bad analogy, but I think I've said it. For me, it's funding priorities. And I think, as I've reflected since last year's conversation, I went back and watched the video from last year in preparation for this meeting and watched the whole long meeting from last year and the conversation, and where is our role as elected and then as a funding decision maker, and where's that separate but collaboratively working with staff, and where does that meet our obligations as fiduciary agents, and where does that meet our needs, and it's selfish, right? How do I fulfill my responsibilities? And to my colleagues that are asking questions about why isn't there money going to housing from this? Money ought to be going to housing for this, and that's not for you guys to worry about. That's for me to worry about. But there is an impression that we are having an impact on funding, and we are not. And that is shocking to my colleagues that we are not having that. As a representative on this group, I am having zero impact on funding decisions and funding priorities. And I said, I don't get those. They don't come to me. I don't see them. In fact, the proposals are decidedly not in front of me, and for some good reasons. But from funding priorities, that is something that this group should be, I think, considering, and we should be targeting what level of specificity to narrow the funnel or keep it as broad. And so in your categories, the services, you said it was the biggest. I'm assuming supportive housing would be in that.
It is. As a matter of fact, I can tell you that
And I didn't mean to.
oh, no, it's
I
fine.
send you
But
down a
I have
rabbit
the
hole.
recommended actions available for that group. One is about evaluating current access. That's not something that funding needs to be
Fixes.
happening for. We've already done a bit of an evaluation for some of those and are working on others. Improving communication and coordination amongst providers, increasing service availability and positive outcomes for vulnerable members of our community. So that's a lot of the service piece. Increased coordination and integration of services for individuals with complex needs.
Mhm.
So an integrated care, coordinated care option there. And then advanced solutions to providing permanent supportive housing to qualifying individuals. So really in that largest priority area of the plan, there's those three types of services.
Okay. So what helps me out in this conversation is you just said these things and you named them specifically. If the NOFO said these things in services and a subset of the 1.7, whatever you know, read in people in the field think is the right amount. I'm not gonna debate that, right? If you tell me half of the 1.7 ought to go for those 5 things that you just read, and that went out in a NOFO, that is a specific enough funding priority for me that would help me to support the budget the way it is. And that way I'm going back going, okay, they're making $1.2 million available for these 5 things. And they're going to go, oh, okay.
So I think
Am I
that
making
this
sense?
conversation has been extremely helpful because in past years, I felt like we were meeting your needs with the priority areas of the behavioral health action plan. So until today, I did not realize that you were asking for something different other than making those decisions on proposals. So we have, I think Kelly can restate this in a way with dollars allocated to specific areas that will make you more comfortable.
Yeah, so if we look, since we already have allocations in 2 of those buckets, well, $0 and 60,000. If we take the annual NOFO amount of 1.764 and divide that up between those areas that Stephanie just read, which all fall under the access bucket, strategic priority, then you would have specific things that you could say were funded by that 1.74764. Is that helpful?
That certainly is. And my comment from, I think, our last special meeting about, being able to go back and look at the materials and say, we voted on this and this is what we said. We don't have any of that. And so I would want that included in materials, however that works. Whether you send us something out after this meeting that gets added to the official record, or it's online where I can look back and anybody else who is caring about this and has an opinion about this can go look at and say, oh, this is what the proposal was. This is what they approved. They approved insert number here for those things Stephanie just talked about.
And the amount would be 588,000 if
There
we
you go.
divided that by 3.
There you go.
So,
With the opportunity for them to indicate that there was cross impact, because some of those do overlap because they roll up under access. But yeah, that would be, each of those priorities would be funded at a level of 588,000.
But you'd like them spelled out, which I think would be helpful.
Super.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
But is that
that's the
okay?
adjusted
That's what
budget
you're
that
looking
we're,
for?
So let's read it into the record for this meeting. So it's under access to care. And there were 3 priority areas.
Service access and delivery is the,
the bucket.
yeah.
so just, this sounds like, improvement. I just wonder though, in terms of strategic alignment, is that, how you feel they should be distributed, equally weighted, versus, what, and also including, here's why. Here's what we think we're going to get for this, and here's how we'll know. It's kind of that, so what, at the end of it, what did it result in? And I'm not suggesting that we have to answer those questions today or anything. I'm just saying, as we continue to mature this process, I think that would be super helpful for us and for the community as a whole to build confidence that this is making a tangible impact that people can feel and see in what's being done, not just activity, but actual progress.
Well, and I think it's important to note that the plan itself includes outcomes that providers and the community are working towards and have to report. And I think that that's something that isn't as transparent yet because it isn't yet on the website. We don't have that tracker updated to include numbers impacted and such yet.
I-
So
Go
what I
ahead.
was going to say is that what's currently being shared to the greater community is more about activity, but outcomes and impact is a large portion of what providers are looking at and reporting.
So I guess my question is, I'm looking at the clock because I actually have a 5 o'clock client. I canceled I rearranged multiple clients to be here today. And I am trying to get to my 5 o'clock appointment. So I guess my question is, do we need further discussion or have you heard enough allocated and earmarked under specific categories or specific targets to be able to vote on this item?
If we're reading this into the record and documenting it, as you pointed out, yes, I have the same question my colleague brought up is that appropriate? I'm not going to push that today. But going forward, I think that that's what we're looking for is maybe it's not a third, a third, a third. Maybe it's 2/3, an eighth, and whatever the rest of that fraction equals, right? And that you guys inform and you guys split up the money and then hand it to us in a budget. And we can see, okay, here's clear funding priorities. This is what you're into. And then next year, when you kick back and say X was for this under this big thing and X was for, right, we can go, what happened? And you guys go, nobody gave us a proposal or whatever the deal was. Right. And so then we at least have some way to go, is our funding process effective? Do we need to do something different? Because right now we don't have, at least from what I see and I get, maybe it's inside the county ecosystem, but I don't see it or get it, to be able to do those kind of evaluations that, you know, I'm supposed to be responsible for doing.
Yeah, I think I could get comfortable with that too. And I think just the conversation, that we had earlier, including Judge Yoder and trying to keep people out of the detention center, for example, as a measure, whereas, the population may be increasing. Those are the kinds of things, Stephanie, those outcomes where it is tangible at a macro level so that we can see it at the macro level too. So thank you again for all your effort to share today.
So do we have a vote? All in favor? I need to read, oh, apologies. So reading into the record that the 3 areas for the 1.764 is to be utilized to fund the 3 recommended actions from the Service Access and Delivery section of the BHAP to include increased service availability and positive outcomes for vulnerable members of our community, increased coordination and integration of services for individuals with complex needs, and advanced solutions to providing permanent supportive housing to qualifying individuals. With that, all in favor?
Okay.
All right.
Aye. Anyone opposed? The motion carries.
Thanks for the discussion.
Thank you. Moving on to 4D, selection of annual and special meetings for 2027. Seems we need to schedule a special meeting for sometime in the relatively near future. What time frame do we need to do this on? So you guys have time to get those NOFOs out with the language and you need. It's the proposal.
If we could meet by the end of the month. Yeah. Just so we can
We're
get
not the
this
only one that
out. Or I know there's what's the holiday? Is that the 7th? Is the 7th? The 28th?
I know, man. I know, man. That's why I said Friday.
Ashwini, does that give you time to work on a proposal? We can work together on it
Procedure.
for the multi-year.
The 28th, is that
I could do
early in the morning?
would be great.
I cannot do
7:30.
it.
Okay.
I'm available starting.
Not a meeting thing.
Yes.
Thank you.
Proposals for meetings for the next year. If we stick with our end of August, or Friday, sorry, that would, third Friday would be August 20th of 2027 would be our annual meeting.
Busy that day.
Are you serious?
I'm so super busy that day. Yeah,
Okay.
totally.
Well, okay. And then if we could schedule placeholders for quarterly meetings, just in case something comes up, so we're not having to do those impromptu. We'd have on hold, we'd have Friday, November 20th, February the 19th, May 21st.
I will not be available on November 20th.
On November 20th, okay.
I will not be here. November 20th
You're
and
talking about
22nd. I don't
2027.
wanna
Or
talk
sorry,
about-
no, that's 2020. This would be the next quarter.
Oh,
So
next
November,
quarter,
yeah,
okay.
November 20th of 2026.
Which is a Saturday. Oh, wait, no, it's not. I'm on the wrong month. Never mind.
Well, and I know the 19th I'll be in,
Yeah.
I'll be on a work trip. So I'll be there.
I'm still not.
If I can
available.
remote
How about-
in,
how
that
about
could
if
work.
you Send out proposals and
Yep.
a doodle poll.
Yep.
And we
Okay.
do that offline.
Yep,
That sounds like a
Perfect.
great
Good
idea.
call.
Perfect.
I like it.
okay. But
All right.
Friday, August 20th of 2027 is good for annual. Okay.
All right. I'm assuming I don't have to vote on those. Items for information, 5A. Report?
Just sharing
I do need to run.
Oh,
So
yes.
quickly on the what that may
Apologies.
arise, the drug court celebration is, so they're having their 20th anniversary. If you have not been invited, we'll make sure that you get the invitation. It is 11 o'clock, so it's next week at the Western Avenue, noon to 2:15.
Yes.
Sorry, I don't know why I have 11.
Just looked at
May I make a
somebody.
suggestion?
Somebody said that to us.
Yes,
Since
Yeah.
you need to leave, should we skip 5 for now and go to 6?
can we do it in 2 seconds?
I'm hoping, but who knows?
I make a motion and all officers stay the same.
Yeah, thanks.
I'll second.
You gotta call the vote.
All right, vote. All in
Aye.
favor?
All right.
Aye.
Anyone opposed?
You wish.
Thank you all. All right. Thank you, Lizzie. All right, going back to 5A. Your report?
I just shared in my packet, we have the annual report for you guys that goes from July 2025 to July 2026. That's in page 22 to 29. And I guess an update on the new composition of FAC, which will be September of 2026. I think the only change we know about right now is Sheriff Matling.
That's correct. My last day is November 30th of 26. I believe the CJCC Executive Committee has decided that they'd like to keep whoever's in the position of sheriff in this because they have the most to explain out of the budget. So it would be, my replacement would likely be John Albee, who is running uncontested. for sheriff. So, if we do November 20th, if you do that meeting, it will likely be Lieutenant Albee, soon to be Sheriff Albee, attending that meeting. Okay. Yeah, I will not.
And thank you for to
Yes.
Sheriff Lane for his service to this group.
Absolutely.
It has been a productive but arduous journey getting us to this point. So I appreciate your attendance in these long meetings.
Thank you.
And as a provider of the for the community, I would also like to say that I appreciate your unwavering support and recognition for the impact of behavioral health needs.
I became educated very quickly, more than I was. I mean, I working in the courthouse, I saw with, with recovery court and things like that. I became quite educated, but being in charge of the jail and the needs of the folks that we serve there gave me an outlook like never before. So I'm very supportive of it all and understand what the impact of the services are to the community and everyone's budget in the community. So
Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yes.
Appreciate it.
All right. Do we need a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Fabulous. All in favor?
Yes.
Aye.
Aye.
We're adjourned.
What were we